Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Digital Leaders AI Week 2025. And our session, AI Zero to AI Hero, Implementing Artificial Intelligence Lawfully and Ethically. My name is Nicola Cain. I'm the Principal Consultant at Handley Gill Limited. We are a legal and regulatory compliance consultancy specialising in responsible AI governance, data protection, online safety and related human rights and ESG. We've got about 30 minutes to download to you pretty much everything we know about AI. So we're going to crack on. So please do buckle in. What we're going to cover today, getting started with AI, utilizing AI strategically, establishing your AI policy, AI governance, AI legal and ethical safeguards, and finally, we'll point you to some resources. So getting started with AI. First of all, you may not think that you are using AI, but AI is almost certainly using you. Whether your staff are using AI on a shadow basis under the table because you don't have a policy on AI, or AI is a risk to you because potential bad actors could be using AI against you. AI is being used in the course of cyber attacks, for example. You need to think about your use of AI and at least defend against it, even if you don't want to use it proactively. Hopefully, though, by the end of today's session, you'll feel comfortable being proactive with AI. But don't get caught up in the hype. We're AI evangelists. We think AI is great, but do it right, do it the right way. And bear in mind that just because something is available to use in the UK, to purchase in the UK, don't assume that means it's lawful and ethical to use it. Be mindful that the EU has brought in strict laws on AI, which means that there's lots of companies who've got products that they need to sell. Be mindful, therefore, that the UK is a market where people may be trying to offload AI products. Build your personal and organizational AI literacy. When we're thinking about AI, it's really helpful to have it doesn't mean you need to become a coder, you don't need to be a developer, but just try and keep abreast of and get a basic understanding of what AI is and how AI works. We've seen lots of kind of well-reported scandals of people who've used AI in ways they didn't really understand, lawyers who've risked being disbarred because they thought ChatGPT, for example, was essentially Google search, which it's not. AI is a stochastic tool, which means it's going to give you what it thinks is the most statistically likely output in response to your prompt. It is not a truth teller. Treat AI adoption like any other transformational change management project. You really must prioritize bringing your people along with you. Lots and lots of AI deployment projects fail because people and staff don't have the understanding or the commitment to the use of AI. And there's a lot of fear around AI and concern that it could take away people's jobs. That isn't and doesn't have to be the case, particularly if you're using AI responsibly and ethically. But you need to be alive to the fact that people do have these concerns. They're legitimate and you're going to need to address them. So how do you use AI strategically? Don't treat AI as the solution in search of a problem. We keep seeing companies wanting to say we're AI first, or we feel we should be doing AI because everyone else is. That's a good reason to think about it and get started. That's not a good reason to just implement any old AI project or tool that comes along so you can say that you're doing AI. Make sure you engage the C-suite in the AI strategy and ensure that your board is determining your organization's AI risk appetite. AI risk is going to be a major thing. It's something identified by the Institute of Directors in their Code of Conduct for Directors. when they think about what risk management looks like in the context of responsible business. So thinking about, where do we want to sit on AI? Are we going all guns blazing? Are we looking for a transformational opportunity in our industry? Or do we see this as a productivity play? Having the C-suite think about these issues, and what it looks like in your organization is really important. Adopt a risk-based approach. Some of what we're going to go through today is going to be appropriate to some quite significant and potentially challenging AI tools. You're not necessarily going to have to do all of these things or all of them to a high level of work if you're, for example, thinking about adopting a chatbot tool that you're going to fine tune and train on your own HR policies to have people ask, what their holiday allowance is or something along those lines. That's going to be a low AI risk or low risk AI use case. Whereas other projects, like some of the live facial recognition technology projects that we've advised clients on, are going to be considered very high risk, some of the most contentious AI use cases you can adopt, and you're going to have to prepare to do a reasonable amount of work in order to use them and use them properly. Make sure that you align your AI use with your wider organizational strategy and priorities and embed the use of AI into your existing workflows. There's been a recent report from MIT which demonstrating that failure to do this is leading to a lot of AI projects, by far the majority of AI projects, to fail and not see the return on investment that companies were presumably hoping for. So consider how you will assess and demonstrate the return on investment of AI in your organization. Do you know how long your teams are already spending on particular repetitive tasks, for example, that you want to use AI to replace? If you don't, and you're thinking that this is something that you might want to test, then consider start recording that data so you've got data and a point of comparison. Again, that may well help your staff to feel more confident about AI because you've got measurable measures by which you can assess whether it's actually better. And remember as well, when you're thinking about using AI, that we shouldn't just be looking at efficiency, can we do this better, but also at quality. Potential AI use cases can be transformational, but are probably more likely to be productivity enhancing in many organizations. Consider repetitive, process-driven tasks. AI is really good at things like data analysis, recognition, event detection, forecasting, personalization, interaction, recommendation. It's used in Netflix, for example, goal-driven optimization, and content creation. And when I say content creation, excuse me, I particularly mean around things like graphics. It can be used for example, marketing content and things like that. It can be good, but it can also, as I've mentioned, with the reference to lawyers who've used ChatGPT and its output in legal submissions and things like that, it does need checking. So if you want to get AI, you've got the board on board. What next? Well, you need an AI policy. You need to prepare, communicate, and implement an organizational AI policy and keep it under review. What should be in your policy? You're going to want to address things like AI literacy requirements, how your organizational values interact with AI, what AI products or purposes are going to be permitted in your organization. Are you going to permit specific tools and block others? Or are you going to say, if you're doing X, Y, or Z, you can use AI? Are you going to ban certain information from being used with AI? Are you going to say no personal data, no commercially sensitive information, for example? You're going to need to think about your procurement or deployment gateways. What criteria are you going to put in place before you decide whether you're going to use an AI tool? What are your data logging requirements? This is going to be important, particularly for monitoring and oversight. What data are you going to need people to record about their use of AI? how it interacts with your legal and regulatory requirements. We're going to come on to that again in more detail, but thinking about those and highlighting them and letting people know things they need to be mindful of. You're also going to want to think about compliance with responsible AI principles. And again, that's something we're going to address in more detail shortly. Monitoring and oversight and consequences of non-compliance, something you're going to want to think about with your employment teams. If someone doesn't comply with the policy and something goes wrong, how are you going to treat that? Is that misconduct? People need to be made aware of that. Here is an example, our checklist, our helping hand checklist for an organizational AI policy. We're going to give you the link to those resources at the end. And you can, in your own time, go and have a look at that. So you've got your AI policy. What about AI governance? You're going to need to establish, probably for most organizations, particularly large organizations, an AI governance board. That board should draw together your expertise across the organization, and it should be multidisciplinary. This is not something that should be entirely driven by legal, nor should it be entirely driven by IT. Who might be on your AI team? A responsible AI governance specialist. If your organization doesn't have one in-house, then look to engage someone to come and help you out on a fractional basis. You could get, you also want to have IT involved, legal, and it might be multiple people in legal, because you're probably going to have to cover commercial, procurement, data protection, equality, human rights, and intellectual property law. So that's probably may not be one person, it may be multiple people from legal. Regulatory compliance, your data protection officer, if you have one. Business unit representatives, user representatives, really important. As I said, that bringing the business and along with you is crucial to success. You may need to have data scientists if you have them in your organization, particularly if you're thinking about fine-tuning AI models and having your own enterprise models within your organization on-prem, then thinking about what data you're going to use to fine-tune those models. Whether you've got the data already, you need to get the data, whether it's appropriately categorized for the tool you want to use. That will all be really important. HR or people teams, comms, employee representatives, maybe union representatives, procurement, sustainability, people thinking about environmental impacts, diversity representatives, because the use of AI can have particular adverse impacts on specific group, whether that be based on sex, gender, ethnicity. So keeping in disability, so keeping those in mind. And learning and development, because making sure that people understand and can grow with AI will help you succeed. So once you've gathered your board, you're going to have to determine their role in evaluating and approving the development, procurement, and deployment of AI. At what point are they going to be involved? What requirements are you going to place on the organisation? How can you ensure that the board is able to be sufficiently nimble to approve low-risk use cases while they've got the time to actually engage properly with higher-risk use cases and make sure they're fit for purpose and properly monitored? You're going to have to agree reporting and monitoring requirements. So what information is the board going to need from the business about how they're using AI? And how are they going to monitor the use of AI by the organization, both in terms of, is this working? Are we seeing good use cases? Are people getting on board with AI? But more importantly, what is AI doing and what impact is AI having? You'll also want to establish a mechanism where people internally or externally can raise concerns about what they're seeing from AI, and also to enable you to address any complaints that arise. You may decide that's going to sit with the AI governance board. You may feel it's more appropriate to sit with legal, data protection, a combination of those, depending on the nature of what your AI use case is. Ensure ongoing monitoring of both the AI and its impact on behaviour. You want to look at what the AI is doing and that its outputs continue to be appropriate. You also need to think about what the use of AI does to the people who are using it. For example, there's recently been some scientific research that demonstrated that doctors who were using AI, after a period of time, essentially got less good at their job. They'd been using AI to look at, say, comparisons of X-rays, and what they found was they were AI assisted, so the AI was doing some of the work, the doctors were then checking it, but the doctors got less good at checking the AI over time. We do have a tendency as humans to believe what the computer says, and so you've got to be very careful that if someone sees an AI output that they think is wrong, that they don't second guess their own professional judgment and expertise, but they do then look at that and start interrogating that and report a potential issue. That's really important to make sure that AI is working as it should and continues to work as it should. And it's perfectly normal, common, and expected that after AI has been used for a period of time, you may need to kind of retrain it, refine tune it to make sure you're still getting best value. You want to make sure that your AI governance board reports into your main board of the organization. As I said, AI risk is something they're going to need to be familiar with and taking responsibility for. So what do AI legal and ethical safeguards look like? You need to be mindful that unlike the EU, which introduced the EU AI Act, the UK does not have AI-specific legislation. That's not to say that it's a complete free-for-all. Existing laws and regulations do apply to AI. Most likely, you are going to face, if you're thinking about AI adoption, you're going to need to worry about data protection law, the UK GDPR, the Data Protection Act 2018, and there are some amendments currently working their way through that haven't quite been haven't been commenced yet, but that will be brought in by the Data Use and Access Act 2025, that will make certain uses of AI using personal data easier than they are right now. The Human Rights Act 1998, particularly thinking about privacy and discrimination. Discrimination, the Equalities Act 2010. Intellectual property, both from the IP that's in the system and how it's been trained and what the use of that means for you, but also making sure you're protecting your organisation's IP and copyright. So thinking about the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988. And the common law of confidentiality, again, thinking about protecting your own organisation's own confidential information and information you owe duties of confidentiality to others, and making sure you're not breaching those. You'll also want to have regard to the UK's responsible AI principles. These were identified by the government in their white paper, A Pro-Innovation Approach to AI Regulation in 2023. These were the 5 principles: safety, security, and robustness, appropriate transparency and explainability, fairness, including legal compliance, accountability and governance, and contestability and redress. The infographic on the side is again one of the resources that you'll be able to link to at the end of this presentation. Some of those will be encapsulated potentially if you're doing your legal compliance. So for example, transparency, you may be obliged, if you're using personal data, you may be obliged to meet transparency obligations in relation to that. But if you're not using personal data, then you might not be legally obliged to comply with transparency, but that is something that the government is putting forward and asking organisations to adopt. We recommend you conduct an AI impact assessment. And if you're sat thinking, oh my goodness, we do data protection impact assessments, dozens of pages long, we have to do equality impact assessments, I can't do another impact assessment. We feel your pain. We created a template where we essentially try and pull all of the assessments together into one document. So we have a modular approach, essentially, where we say, okay, this is the tool we're using, this is what it does, and this is the information then, so you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again in multiple documents. But we do recommend an AI impact assessment, particularly for higher risk AI use cases, so that you can demonstrate that and it helps you think about the issues, what the risks might be, how you might be able to mitigate them, and you can document that you've acted responsibly. But it's not just about your legal obligations and what the UK says are responsible AI principles, because unfortunately, there isn't yet global agreement on what responsible AI looks like. You might be aware President Trump came in and kind of threw out several executive orders from the previous President Biden around responsible AI. So what does that mean? Well, there are multiple really different frameworks for responsible AI currently. One of those is UNESCO, the UN organization UNESCO's recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And that identifies some additional things. So on top of what the UK's responsible AI principles are, this identifies some additional principles. So proportionality and do no harm, human oversight and determination, sustainability, really important, particularly if you're an organisation that is committed to principles of sustainability, and awareness and literacy. So that was a very, very quick run through of, if you're thinking about AI as an organisation, you haven't started yet, you want to do it right. That is a kind of a framework and an approach for you to adopt AI lawfully and ethically. This, if you scan this QR code, it will take you through to our resources, and we've also popped into the chat a link to the resources page with those bits of information. We had a request if we can share the link on Doctors and AI, and we will add that after the talk. We will add that on to the resources page, and in due course, we'll also make a copy of the recording of this session available on the resources page. If you'd like to follow us, we are on all the social media. We've got we're on Twitter and X. Our main account is on Handley Gill. We do have a specific account, AI Regulation UK. We're also on Blue Sky. We're also on Threads. We're on LinkedIn. Our website is there. We publish a range of information. We do blogs about AI issues. We also have available our helping hand resources, templates, checklists that you may find of assistance. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. If we run out of time to deal with any questions, we will gather them up and put the answers on our resources page. But thank you very much for joining us today at Digital Leaders AI Week 2025 for AI Zero to AI Hero, implementing AI lawfully and ethically. I'm Nicola Cain. I'm the CEO and Principal Consultant at Handley Gill. If you want to contact me, my email address and LinkedIn are there. Please do feel free to reach out. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the week.